Hello there and welcome back to Tatooine Tableflip. I'm Jimmy and today we're going to be looking at The Crow, Fire It Up from Upper Deck Entertainment. I'm going to grab a cup of tea and then we'll get it to the table. The Crow, Fire It Up is an abstract asymmetrical game designed by Ben Chakosky and Danny Mandel and released by Upper Deck Entertainment. Based primarily on the film version of The Crow, 2 or more players control either the street gang or Eric and his friends as Devil's Night rages through Detroit. Back in 1989, I lived for a brief period in Spokane, Washington, where I met a punk rocker who called himself Finn. He introduced me to a small indie comic simply titled The Crow. At the time, there had only been a few issues out and they'd both been collected into Volume 1 and Volume 2, with Volume 3 announced but no real release date in sight. I gave it a hard pass because I wasn't really into the type of comic that was atypical of superheroes, and I didn't want to become invested in one that had no real end in sight. Eventually I relented, and like a diver heading for unknown sunken treasure, I dove into those 2 books head first and immediately became a convert. Fast forward to 1994 and everyone is losing their mind over the impending release of the movie version of The Crow. See, none of us thought the movie would see the light of day after its star Brandon Lee was tragically killed on set just 8 days before the end of production. However, they managed to finish his scenes using stand-ins and some proto-digital trickery, and then foisted this sad parable about love and loss on what became the great unsuspecting us. Little did I know how big of an effect the movie and the comic would have on me. I became kind of obsessed, delving deeply into the making of the movie and reading the comic over and over again. I was a huge fan of the IP, and I've remained so over the years. So imagine my elation when I'd heard that there was going to be a board game based on the film. The game is Fire It Up, in which you and your friends take up as either top dollar street thugs, burning down buildings during Devil's Night in Detroit, or as the resurrected Eric Draven, and his friends who are attempting to kill the thugs, thereby saving the city and allowing Eric to be resurrected with his love in the afterlife. And yes, I said kill. There's adult themes to the game, and so it's rated ages 17 and up. Here's how it works. Top Dollar's thugs are issued their burn orders via these secret objective cards that assign them their win condition for the game. When a character arrives at a location targeted for burn, they roll dice equal to the burn stat on their card, and for every one of these fire symbols they roll, you drop one of these tiny little burn tokens onto the building. When the building has enough burn tokens equal to its burn stat, it's considered burned down. As Eric and company, your job in the game is to make sure that that doesn't happen. And Eric even has an agenda for killing the gang members that's randomized using these tokens. He's out strictly for revenge, as a year before, the gang members killed him and his fiancée. Each of the buildings have their own specialty card that deal out a slight boon, like a video game tossing out power-ups to Eric and company. More on that in a little bit. And all of the characters have some kind of an ability printed on their card. For example, the thugs give a +1 movement or +1 burn or something like that per each of the thugs that I actually found hindered the group rather than help them. As the characters start to die off, their power as a group drops significantly instead of slightly. And Eric gets a great defensive boost ability from the Crow as long as you spend an action to make sure that the Crow is within range of Eric. These are the building cards that sometimes hand out semi-helpful abilities to our heroes, but otherwise I feel like some of them aren't worth taking the action to obtain, such as Eric and Shelley's Home the Loft. This gives Eric the ability, as long as he starts his turn at the loft, to roll dice equal to his current health stat. For each one of these crow symbols he rolls, he gets to draw one of these plot cards. More on the plot cards in a bit, but while this sounds like a great ability on paper, generally Eric is nowhere near the loft, and so you have to burn an action, possibly 2, just to get him back over there. Some of the other abilities also beef up Sarah and Albrecht, but overall I feel like this was something that was bolted onto the game, and it feels more like a convenience, a sort of a if I happen to be near it kind of a mechanic, and that's not something that I'm crazy about at all. These are the plot cards, and each side gets a deck from which to draw from. The thugs draw them whenever they burn a building, and Eric draws one whenever he kills one of the thugs. There are other minor ways throughout the game to get them, but we didn't see that come up very often. They fall into this really weird crack in the game whereby either they really drive the game forward or they become utterly useless and sit in your hand until the end of the game. However, the ones that work well work really, really well, such as insta-burning a building or negating all incoming damage from an attack. Speaking of wounds, combat. Oh, here's where I feel the game loses its balance and starts to topple over like your friend who's had a little too much to drink and leans against you on the train. You see, combat is just extremely luck-driven, whereas the attacker just rolls a handful of dice equal to their attack stat, and the defender rolls an amount of dice equal to their defense stat. You have to roll 2 matching symbols to obtain a hit against the defender, and they only have to roll 1 matching symbol to negate that hit. Each side gets these attack ability cards that grant you special powers based on the symbols you roll, and all of these stack, creating this ridiculous amount of power for a side that I thought the game actually could have done without, as it sort of feels like a cheap attempt to spice up what is otherwise a mediocre mechanic. The imbalance comes from Eric receiving defense dice equal to his current health stat as long as the crow is in the same quadrant as he is, whereas the thugs only receive between 1 and 3 defense dice, and since each of them only have 1 health point each, Eric just tears right through them. Since Eric can't die until top dollar hits the streets, he just retreats to the graveyard when he reaches 0 health. This means that the thugs require quite a bit of finesse to play. Thematically, this falls in line with the movie, but I found that the thugs' effectiveness drops off exponentially as Eric takes each of them out in turn, thanks to their abilities being printed on their character cards. This game deserves proper plastic minis. Now, I know, that's the general kind of spruce up that poor games tend to hide behind these days, but how cool would it have been to have an Eric mini in full revenge gear? The game is pretty straightforward despite being asymmetrical, and while there's not a lot of choices presented to either side, I didn't really find that to be an issue, since going in I knew this was not going to be a heavy Euro style game or anything like that. There is, however, just enough crunch to make it interesting thanks to all of the interactions between you and your friends, and you're going to find yourself heavily invested in what they're doing on their turn. Oh, this one stings a bit. I like this game, but I don't love it, and that falls to the imbalanced gameplay, whereby possibly someone's not going to be having a very good time. The game plays extremely fast, generally in 30 minutes or less, and is brutal in its adult themes, hence the age 17 or above rating. I really, really love the IP, and I wanted to really love this game, but there's just too many little holes for me to get just beyond that threshold. When it ticks over the way it should, it's extremely fun to play, and for that and the IP, I think it's just barely gonna squeeze its way onto my game shelf. That's it for this time. Hey, I want to thank everybody who's subscribed to the show. You guys rock. I am having an extremely good time making this thing, and I love that I'm getting the great feedback in the emails, so keep it coming. Speaking of which, you can find us online at boardgamerblues.com, or you can contact us on Facebook or Twitter at @BoardGamerBlues. Or if you like, you can email me directly at jimmie@boardgamerblues.com. That's Jimmie@boardgamerblues.com. And make a recommendation for how you'd like to see the show improve, or recommend a game for either unboxing and or review, or just, send a message just to say hi or to call us names if you like. Hey, that's gonna do it for me, I think. If I'm not out in the streets of Detroit exacting revenge against my murderers, I'll see you guys next time on Tatooine Tableflip. Bye!